All right, good morning, Lacrosse. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you, Jackie, for the invite. My name is Neil Relic, and I represent the Department of Veterans Affairs Debt Management Center. I'm glad to be here to talk about everybody's favorite subject of debt collection. So there you have it. Today we're going to talk a little bit about DMC, how debts are established, kind of what we do, the collection process or the due process portion of how we manage our debts, how we collect debts for the VA, making payments, Treasury offset program, etc. So a little bit about us. We're located in St. Paul, Minnesota, at the regional office. The lovely picture of the Whipple building there that Jennifer, I'm sure, is familiar with. Yeah, the left one. Right. And then the Warren Burger Federal Building. We're actually split into two buildings. But more importantly, the DMC mission statement, the Debt Management Center provides distinctive, high-quality accounts receivable services through a compassionate and value-added approach, empowering our stakeholders to focus on core missions. No, I hear ya, right? That's a tough one. That's a tough mission statement, right? Because you're talking about compassionate debt collection. Is that like? But I can tell you, I won't get on a soapbox, but I did start a little bit about myself. I'm actually from this area. Graduated Holman High School. Was a short time in the Army. I didn't use GI Bill, but used Uncle Sam in the Army to pay loans off for me. So that was excellent. I got my start in a lacrosse outpatient clinic actually for the VA, and then did that for about 2 years. Moved up to Minneapolis area. Took a job with a pension management center. Because this building right here on the left houses the regional office for compensation and pension benefits for the state of Minnesota, the Debt Management Center, the VBA, where Jennifer's office, as well as the Pension Management Center, which manages pension benefits for 32 states west of the Mississippi. So there's a lot of VA happening in that building in St. Paul there. But like I said, I've been working for the DMC. I started in our call center, so I can relate to the compassionate approach of customer service. I find it very important. I'm really big on it. So there is, believe it or not, a compassionate approach to what we do in our overall mission at DMC. We're established in '91, as I stated. These are basically, the DMC is really the collection agency for the VA. We're not part of VBA or VHA, the Health Administration, but we're separate out of the Office of Management. We're what's called a franchise fund. We're fee for service. So in a nutshell, our stakeholders, VBA, VHA, NCA, which is the National Cemetery Administration, they pay us more or less to collect their debt for them, for the VA. But we're VA employees, but just a kind of little overview of how that, I guess, is organized, how we're organized there. We service approximately 600,000 accounts and collect over $1.5 billion annually. So again, I mean, it's not the most glorious thing to talk about, debt collection, but very, very crucial, not only for the taxpayer and, you know, supporting, I think, the fiscal year 19 upcoming almost $200 billion with a B dollar budget that the VA operates within, but also the veterans. You know, that's what we're here for, and that's what you're here for. So I thank you for your service to our veterans that you do on a daily basis to assist in administrating the benefits. We're about 250 strong. Actually, that needs to be updated. We're closer to, as you can see, FY17. This PowerPoint needs a little bit updating, but we're closer to 300 right now. About 40% veterans ourselves at the center. And one quick side note, this is pretty informal, so if you have questions as we're going along, just kind of fire at will. You don't have to wait till the end. So talk a little bit about debt establishment. One thing I like to, I guess, kind of refresh or point out, not that you have to know, is that we collect all sorts of type of debt, you know, compensation, pension, home loan, and of course education, as well as VHA first party medical debts. So up here it says 75 Bravo. I'm sure you're all familiar with what we call deduction codes. For Chapter 33, specifically for this in this context, I'm going to refer to student debt as 74B and school debt as 75B, because that's the big difference between the Chapter 33 deduction codes between those two types of benefit debt. Here, you know, this is probably a straight out of the SEO handbook, the 7 reasons a school debt is established. Student never attends classes. The second bullet here, it's noteworthy to point out that the student has to completely withdraw of all the classes for the school to get the debt before the term. So that's noteworthy to point out there. We can talk about that in a few moments. Student passed away during or before the term started, duplicate payments, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit about the collection process. So again, DMC administers the debt collection or the due process for debts that are created. We're going to talk a little bit about letters, but before I talk about our NOI, Notice of Indebtedness, you're probably used to getting a letter from the regional processing office first. There's kind of a heads up that says, hey, your school has no repayment, you know, yada, yada. We're going to kind of let you know of your rights and everything. But our letter from the DMC is actually the first official debt letter. That starts the due process for collection, okay? We send that first, so it's typically about 30 days after you receive the RPO letter. Does everybody know what I'm referencing there? Okay. The first NOI we send 30 days later, we send the second one. 30 days after that, we send the third. Now, Reference Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1996, that almost needs to be updated too. We'll talk about TOP in a little bit, but that used to make the requirement 180 days reporting delinquent to the Department of Treasury for delinquent non-tax federal debts. That changed to 120 now, so TOP's actually 120. But we'll get to that in a minute. Hopefully you don't have to worry about that, but it happens, so we'll discuss it further. So the first letter here is basically saying, here's the debt, here's how much you owe, here's your options for payments. You'll see the file number. Everything will be up there in that upper right-hand corner. That's good information to reference if you have to call us or email us. Deduction code is the 75. As you can, I don't know if you can see it up there. That's what we're referring to as a school debt. And then the payment remittance coupon, or stubby as we call it, will always be attached to each letter. Now, I'm jumping to third notification letter. This is important because you notice there's 3. The second one sent by default, but schools can, so the second letter, go back, the second letter references referral to the Department of Treasury cross-servicing, which has tools for delinquent debt collection. We don't have to, we bypass the second letter for the purpose of this presentation because schools can't get referred to cross-servicing, only TOP. So the third letter is important because this is going to be 60 days after the first letter, and this will basically state that, okay, we gave you a heads up, this is kind of your 60-day warning order that if you don't pay the VA, we can and will refer your delinquent debt to the Department of Treasury for offset. Here we just talk about making payments to DMC. This is important to make sure that the debt's been established before sending funds. That's why I talk about the letters, because sometimes you might get a letter from the RPO that the debt has been established, but you haven't received a letter from DMC. So things can change. There can be award actions done to the, I guess the award, or adjustments made to the claim process and paperwork that might change things. So the letter that you get from the RPO might not always be correct. There might be changes that happen. The letter that you get from us is kind of the official one. So in other words, wait for the DMC letter to make your payment along with this coupon back to us. If you don't, like I said, I think a lot of times we'll kick those payments back. I think it's Muskogee. If we get checks from schools and there's no debt on the record yet, we'll just kick them back to Muskogee, and it'll really delay the processing. Here's the address, and I'm gonna have some flyers, some handouts too. So if you don't want to write this down, that's fine. I'll be on the handouts. It's also on the internet as well. Make sure you include the student's full name, social security number on the check. You can pay up to 25 students with one check, but it's very, very important that you list that information attached. We can figure it out, I guess, eventually, but it's best to just keep it organized so we know how much funds to apply to each student. Any questions so far? This will come into play too if you ever have to make a payment for a student debt. Question? That's a good question. So if a student gets a 74 Bravo that's assigned to the student and they're enrolled and they're getting benefits, it's typically, we still have to give them due process. So we have to give them a 30 days. We could talk, towards the end of the slide, we have some information about what resources the veterans have or the students, the beneficiaries have for sending a dispute or asking for a waiver of debt. So they'll have that first DMC letter. We have to give them the 30 days by law, but then part of that, if they're actively receiving benefit, it's typically going to be about 30 days after that will the system it systematically happens, and we'll identify that they're receiving active benefits and automatically offset. It's hard to say. I mean, I'd have to get some more information on that one. You know, Jennifer.
I can add a little bit to that, just knowing from the processing side. So that's if they've never contacted DMC. So they have a debt, they know that they have a debt, they haven't taken that action to call DMC and set up a payment plan. That's when we start taking that money. So we're going to take their housing or their books until that debt is repaid if they have not contacted DMC. Otherwise, they can set up a payment plan or yeah, just tell them, I just want it taken out of my next payment.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Jennifer. It's very just to have them contact us right away, because if they agree to it, okay. Yeah, I know we have, there is some challenges with the call center and the volume, but that we're getting really better at. But have them contact us because it will be automatic, like Jennifer stated, but we want to give them opportunity to set up a payment plan. Otherwise, we'll grab, it'll grab from book stipend, housing stipend. Tuition and fees, typically it's not going to grab, generally speaking, because that's a payment to the school, unless they're over the cap and the payments are going to the student. That happens. Also, one thing that's noteworthy is that you may not run across this, but we can also offset compensation and pension benefits to pay off student Chapter 33 debt. That happens. So again, have the student call us because that's an option for them. They want to call us either way. So I mean, it's probably a good idea to refer them to us, to our office. Yeah, I can. Let me backtrack a little bit. So, and I believe, Jennifer, this is the handbook, correct? So, I mean, this is pretty much the reason why a school is going to get the 75 Bravo letter. Anything besides this, the student's going to get the debt. So, they drop courses, or
So yeah, if it's any sort of reduction and there's credits remaining on that specific line of certification, that's going to be a student debt. If you're changing the credits to 0 on or before the first day of the term, very simple, that's going to be a school debt. So if you're changing the credits to 0 on or before the first day of the term, school debt. If you're just reducing that credit amount, that is always going to be a student debt.
Exactly. And just a little personal experience too, like starting in our call center and taking over tens of thousands literally of calls from veterans. That's a very common question. A veteran or a student will call and say, why do I owe you people money when you paid the school, right? So it's a good question. It's a fair question. And I always give the spiel kind of like this. I say, the VA is like the lender, or I guess the Treasury is the lender, but the VA is the lender, just like a student would take out traditional lending from a bank. The student typically doesn't get the payment from the bank pays the school directly, same like the VA does. So whenever there's a change of enrollment that happens, let's say on or after the first day of class, the VA can't possibly keep track of every single school's financial or refund policy for drop or add within whatever that institution's policy is. I mean, think about it. Out of the thousands of schools that, hundreds of thousands, who knows? So that's why we put it on the student, just like a bank would. If that makes sense.
Yeah, but like a non-standard course. So like when you have regular term course, so regular semester enrollment, and then they had a non-standard term and they dropped that non-standard course prior to the term, the VA still, because they're enrolled in those other classes, assigns the debt to the student in that situation. They're not supposed to, but they do, so we got a call most of the time. Okay.
Like
I'm
I
always
said,
happy that ELRs are to
okay,
save me
we're
every
going
time.
by line of certification, okay? So here's your standard term. You're not doing anything with that, but here's your non-standard term. You're making those credits 0 on or before the first day of the term. That should be a school debt. That's news to me, but so I would follow that up with, I would ask you as certifying officials a couple questions. One, how are you reporting it? And two, when you ask the VA that question and why the debt is where it is right now, is it their error? Did they make an error? Because a lot of times, as everyone in this room has probably experienced this situation, you report that withdrawal, and for whatever reason, there's this little box in the processing system that the VA has to check that says student did not attend. Okay, if that box is not checked, the VA is going to pay that student for 1 day of class. So that means that the student is going to get the overpayment, and we're going to actually create a debt on their account and pay them for 1 day. Well, that's not correct. That is a situation where that is a legitimate school debt and should be assigned to the school. And when they go into the processing system, if you notify them, hey, I should have a school debt, and they check that box, that's going to put those monies back onto the student account and then assign the school the debt. So I would guarantee that's happened to everyone in this room, or at least 90% of you. So that is a common situation. That is a processing error, but it's also imperative that when you're certifying in VA once, you're paying very close attention of your reasoning for withdrawal or termination. You're paying very close attention to the effective date. It has to be on or before the first day of the term.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And for Jackie too, for the question, we're going to get to a section 2 where we have a whole team of folks that run our school debt, our 75B team. So we'll provide information for when you have a question about why a school didn't get a letter versus why a student did. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We can't give schools information on student debts, 74B letters, because of privacy concerns. However, that's a lot of the time it's up to the student to say, hey, here's my, take it to you guys or to the finance office and say, here's my letter. They know they're within the school's policy for a refund. They'd have to take that up with you guys, and then whether you're going to pay us on their behalf or whether you're going to give them the money, it's up to you. But we'll cover that in a little bit too. And also, like if you don't get letters, our 75B team is very on top of that, and they do the disputes and everything as well. So fast forward a little bit to making payments. It's just more payment information. You can return electronic payments, however, it has to be the full amount. You cannot return partial payments to DMC. And obviously, just the information up there, there's your return code R31, and then you'd have to include your VA tax ID number as well. Just tell you that because you want all your money. We want it falling off. No, but that's a good question. I'll look into that. So you can shoot us an email, but you were just looking to pay $30 on the 75 and right. And if you're disputing something, typically you're going to get that dispute resolved before you make payment. But then again, that's your prerogative. You know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, and let us know if you have questions. Shoot us an email. Yes.
Is there a good way to know where these initial letters will go if you are, the SCO, but you have a business office? Like, where is there a good way to look to see what the address on file would be to where those would go?
I believe, and Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, that's in Weems. You update your addresses for your in Weems for.
Hopefully the systems talk. Sometimes they don't. But yeah, that hopefully the DMC is taking the address from Weems. Yeah, that would be your question, really.
Yeah, no, it's important to know too. Like, DMC doesn't create debts. We don't create any debts. I mean, we pull. Generally speaking, we pull some stuff back. We resurrect some things, but in general, we don't create the debt. So when everything in the VA world is highly complex IT infrastructure. So in other words, DMC has a system of record of sorts that pulls in information from the RPOs, from BDN, Benefits Delivery Network, and all these different applications that are feeders into us. So the only reason I'm telling you this is because that information that's on file in BDN that the RPO uses, whatever's in there that interfaces with Weems or whatnot, that's what we get. So we don't guess what the address to your school is. It's all fed in electronically to our system before we kick off due process, if that makes sense.
And just to add a little bit to that, if the address that you have on record, I can slightly adjust that to put attention to a certain person or attention to a specific office. I've had those requests in the past because sometimes we have centralized certification, or maybe you're in a different building and all these letters get sent to the mailroom, and the mailroom doesn't know what to do with the VA letter. Well, I can put attention to a specific person or a specific building or whatever you need it to be in Weems. Now, the address of your institution should be where your administrative offices are. So because of the zip code and things of like that, because that is what we base our housing on. So there are some rules that we have to follow to what address we do put in there. But as far as putting it attention to a specific person, I can assist with that.
Thank you. Yes, question? You want the microphone? You can have mine if you want. Yeah, might as well. Speak into the mic. Just don't drop the mic.
Thank you. Okay, we had a school debt. We paid the school debt. A month ago, I got a letter saying they were paying it back to us. And so it was deposited again. I don't know now. Did you change it to be a student debt then? Do we give the money back to the student? I'm really confused.
So let me, if I heard you right, you received a 75 Bravo letter for a school debt, or did you make a payment without getting a letter? Okay, all right, great. And you made a payment, and then we received it, and then we sent you something back saying why you're paying us. Is that right? I think you'd have to email us on a case-by-case basis on that one because it's hard to know without looking at the details of the account. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna drop a name of my buddy Gary Greenwood. I was gonna say I'm Gary Greenwood, but I'll give you some contact information. He works with Education 75 Bravo team, and he's one of the analysts over that team, and we'll take care of it. Just I'll give you his email, I'll give you my email, and then we'll give you the 75B email as well. So shoot us the details, like the silly code deduction, all that stuff, the stubby name, all the pertinent information. We'll take a look into it. Or if you have the letter still, yeah. So it's all in the upper right-hand corner, like I showed you in that first slide. Yeah, so that information, and then, yeah, I have some flyers up here, and I'm gonna get to towards the end of the slides, and we'll have all that information. So if you want to jot it down. But sorry, it sounds like more of a, we'd have to look into it a little bit more for you. And then making payment, this is the pay online website, pay.va.gov. Notice how it's not pay.gov. That's actually your treasury application. So pay.va.gov. And you can make your payments on the website, or you can call us and we can go on pay.gov and make it for you. But again, remember deduction code. You always want to select 75B. Because I don't know if it will let you select 74B, but then you might, oops, I made the payment to the student's debt, and it might reject because they don't have a debt, and you do. So, or here's the physical mailing address. Or actually, no, this is returning uncashed hard copy checks to the Department of Treasury. Now you notice in red, these funds will not bold, capitalize, underline, be automatically applied to any overpayment. I can't answer why. But typically they do. But it's best to be proactive and say, hey, DMC, heads up, I'm returning this hard copy check so that we know where to look for it and to apply it directly to your account to clear it as fast and efficiently as possible. Because again, we collect $1.5 billion in debt a year, so we process a lot of checks on a daily basis, probably $1 million a week. I don't even know, but it's good to just give us all the information that you can. We'll talk a little bit about TOP, Treasury Offset Program. This is the Treasury tool. It's required from the Debt Collection Improvement Act of '96, and it's a requirement through the Data Act 2008, I think it was, that changed the requirement to 120 days. So, not that you don't go to TOP, basically. Don't let the debt get this far. I mean, it's good advice, right? I used to tell this to vets all the time. Don't let Treasury get involved. I work on the Treasury team. I'm a program analyst for DMC, and that's what I do every day is identify transmissions and all these data flows between Treasury and VA to basically refer debts and manage payments that the Treasury has jurisdiction over. So I used to write hearings for administrative wage garnishment. It can get kind of nasty, Schools don't have to worry about it, but if a student has a debt, let's say they have a 74B, they're inactive, they don't get benefits, they get referred to cross-servicing. Cross-servicing can use administrative wage garnishment, private collection agencies, and I think their current rate is 32% of your debt and fees. So You know, we've seen some transfer entitlement debts come through our door that are $100,000+. You tag 32% of that. It's like, don't let them go to Treasury. That's my best advice. Schools? No. No, we don't use CRA. Yes. Yes. But I mean, that's not, I guess, in the context of this presentation for you all, but it's important to note when you're, because the goal here is to help the student, right? You know, so yeah, it's very important. They get those due process letters from us. That second letter I talked about, it's a warning order that says, hey, you know, we're going to use cross servicing if we have to, and TOP, both. So TOP here, we'll give a quick. I don't want to take up too much time. A quick run through of TOP. Basically, in a nutshell, TOP is a treasury tool that's very, very effective for treasury and collecting debts because they match up delinquent debtor TINs and names with federal disbursements. And bada boom, they snatch them up. This can be for students or vendors. This and schools. This can be any federal disbursement. For debtors, it's Social Security, it's OPM, it's railroad retirement, tax returns. So you can imagine around tax season that the DMC call center is pretty popular, or infamous maybe, I don't know, but that's what TOP is in a nutshell. Pursuant to regulations and statutory guidance, et cetera, it's federal law. So again, this is the 120-day mark from your initial notice of indebtedness to your school. And a lot of schools go to TOP. They just do. It's the nature of the business. But I hope it's not yours, because they charge fees too. Why refer to TOP? I kind of just covered this. This is all the statutory, I mean, a general overview of how we're allowed or authorized to refer the debts to TOP. There's the data, 2014, sorry, I said 2008 Data Act. Can't keep it all straight. So anybody have questions about TOP? You're gonna, you know, a lot of schools are gonna email our 75 Bravo team, or they can call the number for TOP if you have questions about offset. Because it goes by 10, and there, as you can imagine, some schools across the land share TINs between their medical centers and their schools, and we'll get a call saying from a doctor at the medical center in New York saying, what the H is going on? My federal payment for this got snagged up for what? Well, it's for a 75 Bravo student that shares a TIN with them at the same school. It can get ugly, so it's good to know that number. Or you can call us, of course, as well. Frequently asked questions here. This is very important because if it's straightforward and you were paid and the student withdrew all the courses, okay, just send the money back, right? A lot of it obviously is not so cut and dry. You know, we do these things all over. We collect debt for the entire country, so we understand that it's never going to be cut and dry. But if it's not cut and dry and you have questions, this is where you want to. This is one you probably want to write down. It'll be in some pamphlets too, where you're going to submit an inquiry for your 75 Bravo debt or overpayment. Please include the student's information, name, last four will be fine if you don't want to email or if you're not allowed to email PII. It's very important that the school's facility code, along with the name, is included, because of course, as you're aware, you have multiple facility codes, and you know some students I've seen up to five school debts in our system. So, for example, 75 Alpha, 75 Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo. That means that student has five different, or was it? Went to five different schools and got a debt for all five of those schools. I mean, you see all sorts of stuff like that. So facility code is very important so that we know that we're applying the right funds to the correct overpayment. And then write a detailed explanation. So this is very important for collection action. If you get a letter and you're researching, as a couple of you have had questions, make sure that you let us know, because collection action here on account, the third bullet down, will be suspended until the inquiry is resolved, unless it's been referred to TOP, which is 120 days. So don't wait 120 days plus to send your dispute inquiry to us. Sometimes, DMC, we have a team that can manage them. We have access to all VBA applications at DMC, of course, because that's part of our job. We need them. But of course, we also work very well with our partners at VBA at the RPOs. So not just St. Louis, but the other ones as well. Atlanta. I don't know if Atlanta's still around, but Muskogee and what's the other one? Buffalo. And then response from the RPO should be received within 30 days. We check these and we report metrics to our chiefs and directors and all that good stuff. So we track it very well. And again, we have specific teams within DMC to deal with it. If you have funds to return but no school debt, refer to the SCO handbook and question whether the validity of the debt as a 74 versus a 75. If the SCO handbook indicates the debt should not be assessed to the school, your school should follow its internal guidelines for issuing a refund to the student. If the SCO handbook indicates the debt should be assessed to the school, kind of vice versa. Some student might get the debt and there might be an error happen. Contact us or the RPO to get it squared away. You can send one check for multiple students. I think this was kind of covered. Just make sure that you list the file numbers and the dollar amounts that the check covers. And make sure that the check total equals the amount of debts you want applied to. So I guess apply general accounting principles as appropriate. Just don't send us too much, or otherwise we'll have to return it to you. This is very important. I think this kind of applied to your question over here. Information regarding the debt will be sent to the student. This is a 74 Bravo debt. Now we can't give you information on it. Like you can't call us up and be like, hey, does Joe Smith have a debt and what's the amount and et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to be able to tell you. That's really up to the student. We put that responsibility on the student to come to you with those questions and say, okay, I'm within your policy, and then you would take action based on your own business rule, basically. That makes sense. Now, if this happens and the student's due for a refund, you want to ask the student for their stubby in their 74 Bravo letter because they get the same NOI as that you would. They can also call us if they don't have the letter or if they want to know their balance so that you can further assist them or that we can further assist them. Does that make sense there? I mean, you probably all have scenarios that get kind of crazy and hairy, and I can tell you those too, because I don't know how many times a student, and I don't know who it's on, whether I'm not picking sides, but a student will get a 74 Bravo debt letter. They'll be waiting on the school, maybe not you all, but like the bursar or the finance office, to refund either them or most of the time refund the VA on the student's behalf, right? But as they're waiting and waiting, and sometimes waiting, remember if the student doesn't call us they have their own due process and waiver rights and disputes. Within 30 days, that collection train just keeps on running, right? So sometimes, a lot of times, and I've seen it working with the Treasury very closely, is that their debts will become delinquent at Treasury, and then all of a sudden they'll say, oh, now my school is going to pay. Well, here's an interesting factoid, is that if the account is at Treasury's jurisdiction and you send a check on the student's behalf to DMC, we are required by law to send that check to Treasury first. They take their piece of the pie and then send the funds back to us. So really, they're probably still going to have a balance left. So 74 Bravo debts can be large. So it's very important that if to communicate these basic principles to the student. Does that make sense? It happens and it gets ugly. Well, we work at we're compassionate debt collectors. Somebody joked about that. We are. We will work with them. I mean, we're not the committee on waivers. We can't make that call, but we do a lot of refunds, payment plans, et cetera. We're there to help out. We can't always meet the business needs, but we try. And I can say this with confidence, to meet the psychological needs of the customers, which are the veterans, if that makes sense. Here's just some more things. It's kind of a little flow chart that kind of compares the student debt versus the school debt. Schools, unfortunately, can't file waivers. You just have to basically either pay in full or send a dispute that we can get resolved. If you don't take action, we'll refer you to top. Same with students. That's part of the due process that we don't have to get into now. But as you can see, the student has more options for resolution, administrative resolution, whether it's a waiver, reduced benefit offset, dispute, payment plan. The difference here is that typically when a student's actively receiving benefits, they don't run a risk of going to Treasury or top, because the VA has the authority to snatch the benefit, the VA benefit, whether it's education benefits. And we can do all sorts of things. We can use Chapter 33 benefits to pay a Chapter 30 debt in the system. We can use C&P benefits to pay a Chapter 30. We can use C&P to pay Chapter whatever. What we can't do is use education benefits to pay compensation and pension. Not that you need to know that, but it's just a little tidbit. This is a toolbox. Hardship refunds, as I stated. We can temporarily suspend offset. That's through the waiver process. All this information is on our website as well, and as well as some flyers I'll have up front. School. Now, I think I covered this pretty well already. But this is some information on how to apply a student's or how to pay a student's tuition debt. You must receive one of the following: the remittance stub for the student, or a letter. If you don't get that letter from the student, just write a note. Hey, this is Jane Smith, and I just want to let you know that I want to make this payment for Joe Smith or whatever, and include all the information from it, whatever you have, social security number, facility code, all that stuff. Does that make sense? Help the student out. If there's no school debt and DMC receives a payment from a school. Okay, yep. So I think I already mentioned that. There's no school debt on file and we get a payment from it, we're going to kick it back to Muskogee and it's going to delay processing. This is, if you want to write this down, or I would say that's some good information right there. That's our call center number. And I know that, I mean, we're a VA call center. Our goal is to, we use our metrics to always improve our efficiency of answering phone calls. As aggravating as can be or frustrating, but that's our number for a call center that both schools and students and debtors can call, and then the EDU box is specifically for your school inquiries. Should I keep that up for a minute? Is everybody good? Gary Greenwood's our management analyst over the 75B, the education and outreach, and then Julie's his boss. She's also a very good source of knowledge and for many things VA and DMC related. So you can jot those down, and by all means, I'll give you my email too. It's not a big deal. Pretty good about answering email. If I don't know something to one of your questions, I'll just forward to one of these people. So, all right. I think that's it. Is there any more questions? Hi.
Hi, Sandy. I'm actually a CVSO.
I've met you before.
Yep. So my question, the part that I see, is when the student debt gets to that and they go after the veteran, and there may be some issues in the family, so the veteran's going, what? They're using education benefits on me, and now I'm told I can't even see anything?
So, like maybe they're a tow recipient. So, the student is the child or whatever it is, or maybe a spouse that is, maybe they're, separated or something. Yeah. So in that case, is there, in my understanding, that dependent, that debt is assigned to that dependent. I feel like the only situation I know of where it's they ever go after the actual veteran is if that veteran didn't complete their service obligation.
What I've seen is on the contrary. So
Okay.
it depends who's the recipient of the benefit. So unfortunately, yes. I mean, tow is something, as I'm sure you're aware of, Jennifer, that it's very difficult because basically the question is, so tow is transfer of entitlement. So if the so what was the question?
So when does that happen? When if a student debt is assigned to the dependent, so their child or their spouse is attending school and they now have a debt assigned to them, what are situations where the VA, or in this case DMC, would actually go after the veteran for those overpayments?
Whoever gets assigned the debt and BDN through the RPO. I mean, we don't make a decision who does that. That's all done. Like we don't create the debt. So if the dependent, if the beneficiary is, let's say, the father, the mother, the brother, the sister, whatever, transfers their entitlement to their, let's say, their son or daughter, and by no fault of their own, the VA links up with the DoD, maybe after the fact, in most cases, obviously, that, oh, hey, by the way, Sergeant Smith didn't quite, he retired early and he didn't meet this obligated service period. Unfortunately, the debt's going to go to the beneficiary. The one, whoever was paid the benefit, it's going to go, and it's a sticky thing. But I'd have to refer to the waiver process, the dispute process, and anything that person can do at the initial phases of their due process to halt collection until, and we get this all the time in Treasury team, because these the work that we got in Treasury team comes from the Treasury via the debtor. Remember when I said those, because a lot of those toll recipients, they're no clue, so they don't take action, unfortunately. So it's at Treasury, and those folks are coming to see you, and what gives, right? Only thing we can do is be proactive in the future and have those, hopefully they're taking action to suspend it or file for a waiver before it becomes delinquent, or before, because those beneficiaries normally aren't going to receive active VA benefits, so they're going to be treated as inactive debtors, meaning they can go to Treasury credit reporting on the beneficiary. Like, I understand what you're saying. Trust me, I've been there 1,000 times. But I don't know if that answers your question, Sandy, but I mean,
we had a situation like that. We had a veteran. He did not complete his service requirement, and his wife got the debt for $35,000.
Right.
And
exactly.
And it was her debt, not his debt.
That's right.
Her debt.
That's right. That's right. DMC. I don't want to sound like a cop out. That's not my intention. But DMC does not determine the debt creation whatsoever. It comes there. We collect the debt. We collect the debt, and we provide assistance to help manage that debt, whether it's a waiver, payment plan. And I've seen them much greater than that, sir. I mean, it happens, and we see those accounts go to Treasury, because they'll take whatever that date was that they didn't meet their requirement, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, they'll backdate it or retroactively backdate it to when the cutoff date is. So in theory, you could have a student, a son or a daughter or a spouse, complete a good portion of schooling. They'll backdate all the books, housing, tuition, and it gets to be much more than 35 grand. A lot of time, it really does, especially tuition and fees.
Can I just ask a question about the waiver process? So I've had one successful waiver go through, correct? So and it was I think it was because we got it sent in early, within the 30 days, like right away, actually within 15 days, which now will a waiver be considered if it's after the 30 days? Because
Yes.
sometimes they'll say, I didn't get that first letter, I don't know, so it will still be okay.
Yeah, it'll be considered. It's just a difference between the suspension of the collection or not. If it's
Okay.
within 30, it suspends collection. If it's after 30, technically it doesn't. But
Okay. But still send it in, still do it. Okay.
yes, yeah, and a lot of those so the Committee on Waivers, the COWC as we call them,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's just St. Louis that manages all the waivers. So DMC processes the waivers. So we get that's like our fee for service. We charge the VBA for processing paperwork. In other words, really. So the waivers come to us, but we don't make a call on the waiver. We just say, well, thanks for your waiver. We sent it to the committee on waivers for their further review. So
It goes forward. The collection
it goes,
keeps going
well, it
forward.
depends. Yeah, if it after 30 days, I mean, after 30 days, it's supposed to continue, but sometimes use the system, wink, wink, no. But no, that's true. So within 30, but within 30 days, it's automatically suspend collections so that they can look at a tow case and deny it or. That's a good question too. I know VBMS is housing what you used to call virtual VA, which housed the COC documents and decisions, but which you can access through VBMS now. But I think that yeah, the best advice is hopefully that the vets or the beneficiaries in the tow cases are being proactive and filing for a waiver and getting everything suspended so that they can have a fair shake at the committee on waivers and compromises wherever that jurisdiction is. If it's a comp debt or an education debt, they're going to have to make that call on whether it's going to be waived or not.
I actually have heard now that they will reach out, like depending on the branch of service. I know the Army does. They actually reach out and they send them if the veteran didn't didn't finish the commitment of the term of service. They do reach out to them and say, hey, this is going to happen and this is what the situation is. So I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
At least the Army. I know each branch of service is supposed to have somebody assigned through the DOD that's supposed to work, with the people who are requesting those transfers, but Army seems to be the most proactive one.
The best thing to do too is just reach out to us at DMC because we can't meet the business needs a lot of times, especially with those waivers or how they're adjudicated. But we will do our best to answer questions, give updates. Like we get calls all the time, like, "Hey, I filed for a waiver 6 months ago. We hope that collection has been suspended during that time." But if it hasn't, you might see some of those accounts at Treasury, like they're getting top notices or they're getting the Bureau of Fiscal Service notices about taking wages and all that nasty stuff. That's when you would have to contact Treasury as well. And I don't want to again be a cop out and say, well, once it's at Treasury, drop the mic, but it's not true because we're there to assist at VA. And at DMC, we're representing a lot of VA, all of VA debt, really, almost all of it. So I hope that helps. Those are sticky situations, but again, we thank you for your time and thank you for everything you do for our veterans. It's great to be here, and thank you, Jackie, again, and have a great day.